Welcome to the Sakimori Research Lab of Universal Spirit. Thank you very much for your visit as always. In the previous episode 20, we deepened our understanding about Armageddon in Revelation chapter 16 from George Vale Owen's Spirit World Communication Life Beyond the Veil, that it is a battle with evil spirits that occurs along with the second coming of Christ. At the same time, in Onisaburo Deguchi's Tales of the Spiritual World, we verified that the Haru in Armageddon refers to Japan, and at that time, it was manifested on Earth as a war between the Imperial Japanese Army and the American Army. This time, by comparing Steiner's lectures and the Owamoto Divine Message by Ushitora no Kanjin Kunito Kotachi no Makoto, we would like to examine the reason why the prophecy of the Bible was fulfilled in Japan at that time, and the spiritual background of the two world wars. In 1920, Steiner made notable remarks about the Japanese people at the time. In history, there are people who lived and migrated in Europe during what is usually called the era of ethnic migration. The souls of these inhabitants are similar to the souls that accepted Christianity, which spread from south to north. In other words, they are souls that grew up in Christianization. The souls that lived in Europe in the centuries after the birth of Christ and accepted Christianity, which is quite different from today's Christianity, have not reincarnated in Central Europe again. The souls that incarnated in Europe in the centuries after the birth of Christ and experienced the spread of Christianity from south to north culturally are now rather incarnating in Asia. What I have just mentioned is particularly evident during the terrible catastrophe of the 1910s. Especially when you know that such souls are incarnating in the Japanese people, you can examine the current global civilization in a new way. I don't think an explanation is necessary for this, but Onisaburo Deguchi said the following. John and Christ are destined to be reproduced in the northeast of the world, which is the God's program of the divine world from ancient times. Therefore, I believe that the content of Steiner's lectures is an important clue to the reason why Owamoto's God's programming is deeply involved with the prophecy of the Bible. Furthermore, in another lecture, Steiner also says the following. You can look at the people who lived in Europe before and after the ethnic migration. They are Europeans who encountered Christianity, which spread from the south, around the time of ethnic migration. They accepted Christianity in a form that had an immeasurable power that affected all of life, which was quite different from today's Christianity and was not yet permeated by abstract and intellectual theology, and appealed to the basic emotions of the soul. Most of the souls who were in Europe at that time and accepted Christianity in this way have spent a slightly longer period between death and reincarnation than in other cases, and are now incarnating in Asia. In particular, many of the souls that were Christianized at that time are now incarnating in Japanese bodies. Today in Asia, it is necessary to clarify that souls who received Christian feelings in a previous life are surrounded by a decade-old Oriental culture from childhood through language. Steiner, on the subject of reincarnation, seems to have recognized that, although there are individual differences, as a principle, one is born as a male or female at least twice in 2160 years, and one can be born as the same sex up to a maximum of 7 times in a row. In this light, we can say that souls who accepted Christ's teachings as a strong emotional impulse were reincarnated in Japan in the 20th century, when militarism forbade the spread of foreign cultures and languages. And at the bottom of the spirits of the people at that time who had received 2 oppressions in Owamoto and overcame their sufferings through faith, there may have been a latent strong longing of the soul for the second coming of Christ in the Bible. Also, Steiner states that the Indians around the time they were conquered by white settlers in America are being reincarnated in Western and Eastern Europe. In fact, the spirit of Silver Birch, who acted as an intermediary between the high-level divine spirit and the medium Maurice Barbanel in the spiritual teachings of Silver Birch, was also an Indian spirit. Also, the name of the White Eagle spirit, who gave spiritual revelations to Grace Cook UK, 1887 to 1958, is said to be derived from an Indian. On the other hand, people in the East around the time of Christ are said to have reincarnated as Americans. In this way, with the second coming of Christ, the truth of past life karma and fate through reincarnation has been revealed worldwide, and we can understand the spiritual background of ethnic issues and global wars. Of course, there should naturally be exceptions for individuals. And the same thing may not necessarily be true in the 21st century. And from Onisaburo Deguchi's point of view, only 3% of the world and 2% of Japan were truly in conformity with the Spirit of God at the time. In that sense, as stated in the Owamoto Divine Message, it is supposed that a global war broke out because all people, both Japanese and foreigners, were equally sensitive to the spirit of evil spirits. Steiner spoke about the Russo-Japanese War in a lecture in 1911, saying something interesting. Let's take a closer example. Spirits from the astral world also participated in the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905, and among them were the dead from Russia. It became clear from spiritual observation that they fought against the Russian people. In the very recent history of Russia, many noble idealists lost their lives in prisons and on the guillotine. They were fine idealists, but they could not forgive those who executed them. Such a vengeful spirit can only exist in the Kamaloka desire period, a period of adaptation in the spiritual world close to reality shortly after death. After death, they permeated the souls of Japanese soldiers from the astral world with hatred and revenge against the Russian people. Only when they reached the divine world could they forgive their enemies. In the divine world, the clouds of hatred and revenge that were inside come towards them from outside, and they realize how terrible and inappropriate these feelings are. Spiritual inquiry reveals how much the entire nation is under the influence of its ancestors. In other words, he points out that there was a spiritual cause for the Russo-Japanese War, where spirits punished within Russia permeated Japanese soldiers with a vengeful spirit against the Russian government. On the other hand, in the Owamoto Divine Message written a week before the outbreak of the Russo-Japanese War, 7 years before this 1911 lecture by Steiner, on February 11, 1904, it was already written as follows. In Japan, a country that cannot continue without the spirit of Yamato Damashii, the soul of the Japanese people, an offshoot of God, the malevolent souls of Russia have crossed over to Japan. They have exploited the hardships of others, acting selfishly and recklessly. Deceiving the spirit of Yamato Damashii, they have pursued their own interests, seeking honor and glory as they pleased. Cunningly, they have ensnared the divine essence of Japan's gods, and God sees through the wicked conspiracy of these Russian malevolent deities. Therefore, here, we must complete a flawless God's program, ensuring not even a drop of water escapes. This will lead to a second reorganization of the world. Furthermore, approximately 5 years after Steiner's lectures, in 1916, the Owamoto Divine Message contains the following passage. If one were to think of the upcoming foreign war as a conflict between people, it would be a grave mistake. It is a war between the ancestors of Japan's heaven and earth and the ancestors of foreign countries, a great war between God and country and country. Japan is the country of the spiritual origin, and the malevolent gods that occupy Russia possess such wicked magical power that they have spread evil to this extent. Until now, the malevolent gods have acted as they pleased, deceiving the spirit of Yamato Damashii. Until now, the evil gods have acted as they pleased, but to prevent things from getting any worse and the world from collapsing, the ancestors of heaven and earth of Japan have incarnated and supported them from the shadows. That is why the world has somehow managed to hold on. Despite this, the evil gods believe that there is no active God with fundamental power, and so they continue to spread evil throughout the world, living in luxury as they please. So that should be enough. If this is still not enough, our ancestral gods who created heaven and earth would never forgive it. The ancestors of the evil gods who occupy Russia still believe that there are no gods in Japan. So, although the spirits of the evil gods seem to be forever plotting evil deeds, the ancestral gods who created the heavens and the earth will never tolerate any further evil. Up until now, the wicked evil gods have done as they wished, and they may intend to continue plotting forever, but the time has come, and all of their plots will disappear like bubbles of water. They seem to be plotting evil in the war to come, but Japan has also prepared a few tricks. Also, since Japan is a small country, we have decided to test the power of Japan's gods against the academic ability of foreign evil gods to demonstrate the true power of Japan's ancestral gods. In this way, in the Owamoto Divine Message, just like Steiner's insight, it is perceived that the Russo-Japanese War was caused not by humans, but by ancestors or gods. However, the evil god pointed out by Ushitora no Kanjin is not the vengeful spirits of the noble idealists who were killed in Russia as perceived by Steiner, but it is believed to be the existence of an evil god who has spiritually manipulated the humans of the Russian regime at the time, who brutally murdered the idealists and created multiple vengeful spirits. Thus, when we compare Steiner's words with this message of God, we can understand the following words of God. A world is coming in which it will be clearly understood whether it is a person who is doing it or whether it is kami doing it. In other words, a global war is not just a fight between humans, but it is understood that evil spiritual beings, manipulating the souls of immature humans with strong desires for control, used humans as tools and impulsively led to war. Of course, in the case of the Owamoto Divine Message, as early as 1892, it is already written as follows. There will be a battle between Tang China and Japan. This battle will be a winning battle. Because God is programming from the shadows. God appears on the surface and lets Japan take the credit. Starting from Russia, there will be another battle. After that, it will become a world war, and you will gradually be able to understand it. In other words, prophecies had been made not only about the Sino-Japanese War 1894 and the Russo-Japanese War 1904, but also about World War I 1914 and World War II 1939. Also, in 1904, it is written as follows. The current Owamoto officers and believers believe that the world will be fundamentally reorganized in this war and are in a hurry, but since it is a reorganization of the whole world, it cannot be done so urgently. This war is the beginning, so if you are not prepared for it, you will complain and be dissatisfied with God later, and you will miss the divine virtue. Here too, it was advised that World War I was the gateway, that is, the starting point or beginning. Furthermore, about the war between Japan and Russia, it is written as follows. The things that the ancestors of Russia are plotting will fail, and the state will not be able to stand. The evil god of Russia's ancestors is plotting an outrageous conspiracy by going to a foreign country, Germany, but since the world of evil is already ending, they should gradually become tormented and have to give up. About World War I, Onisaburo Deguchi also writes in the divine revelation of the eight-headed and eight-tailed guardian deity that went to Germany December 23, 1928. Therefore, the fact that foreign country Germany is deliberately written in the Owamoto Divine Message means that at this point, Onisaburo Deguchi also foresaw that Russia and Germany would go to war. At the same time, it is understood that the evil gods and ancestral spirits of Russia were plotting spiritual conspiracies not only in Japan but also in Germany. In fact, 23 years after the Owamoto Divine Message was written, and 11 years after the god of Onisaburo Deguchi wrote the revelation, the following things are happening. August 1939, the Soviet Union concluded the German-Soviet non-aggression pact with Germany. September 1939, Germany invaded Poland and World War II broke out. Later, Poland was defeated, and Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union divided and occupied it. June 1940, the Soviet Union occupied the Baltic coastal countries. June 1941, Germany, in violation of the German-Soviet non-aggression pact, invaded the Soviet Union. December 1941, the Soviet Union counterattacked the German army and expelled them from the suburbs of Moscow. February 1943, the German Sixth Army surrendered to the Soviet Union. April 1945, the Soviet Army surrounded the capital of Germany, Berlin. April 1945, Hitler committed suicide. May 1945. Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Western Allies. In France, Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Soviet Army in Berlin. In other words, about World War II, Kunido Kotachi no Makoto and Onisaburo Deguchi had clearly prophesied at a very early stage that this would happen. Furthermore, what is important here is that the ancestors of Russia had a grudge against the Russian government at that time. It is believed that the vengeful spirits of the ancestors who became victims of the evil gods in Russia are involving the surrounding countries to overthrow Russia. If that were the case, not only Japanese soldiers, but even Hitler and Nazi soldiers in Germany could have been stirred up by the vengeful spirits of Russia, and it is quite possible that they were made to feel belligerent. Furthermore, the fact that Russia won the war as a result suggests that this war was planned by the evil god from an early stage and was going according to its scheme. However, contrary to the gospel of Christ, the people of the Russian government who were possessed by the evil god, became tools of the evil god, and killed their own people, must naturally have had problems with their spirituality. Furthermore, even though they were victims, the spirits who became vengeful spirits and used soldiers from other countries to stir up feelings of revenge must also have had spiritual problems to some extent. In this way, war is not just a problem between humans who live with physical bodies, but it is the groups of vengeful spirits who make them emotional about the problem, stir up fear, stir up a sense of crisis, provoke, make them belligerent, and stir up a fighting spirit, and the evil gods who intentionally manipulate them, that exist as the root cause. In this sense, it was important to believe in God and seek protection and salvation from the Holy Spirit so as not to be used as tools of evil gods and vengeful spirits. However, this is not a story of the past, but a lesson and recognition that is necessary for modern people who have become aware of such spiritual backgrounds. Finally, in Episode 21, we learned from Steiner's lecture that the Japanese soul was deeply connected to the Christian impulse in the early 20th century. In the next episode, Episode 22, the final episode, we will explore the understanding of the second coming of Christ in Tales of the Spiritual World and its relationship to Owamoto's divine work. We also plan to further explore the God program of Kunido Kotachi no Makoto by comprehensively considering the considerations we have made so far. Thank you for watching until the end.